Welcome to the 2020 Matherville Student Veterans Day celebration. We did have to scale down, unfortunately, this year a little bit, but with that being said, we're proud of all of our veterans and what they've had to sacrifice to bring us our freedoms and liberties we benefit from every day. We cannot thank you enough for your service. In this video, you're going to hear from some local veterans and see some of the work of the Matherville students have compiled in your honor. Once again, thank you for your service to this great nation.
Matherville Intermediate School, thank you very much for taking the time to understand and learn about our veterans. And today, as we celebrate Veterans Day, it's a day we we honor and recognize the sacrifices of so many of the veterans from back to World War II all the way up to our current conflicts today. And a veteran, just for identification, a veteran is someone who served in the military, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, or even Coast Guard, who served in one of the military branches of the service and was discharged after performing their duties. So today we're honoring and recognizing all those men and women who had prior served in a military branch. You know, that's a great question. And we're seeing more and more veterans who wear a hat like this. Or we see a veteran who has, maybe it's a marking on their suit coat or on their shirt saying, I'm a veteran or something. Just identify them in that way. It might even be at your Thanksgiving dinner or a meal at home where mom and dad or grandpa and grandma talk about a family member who is a veteran in the military. So there's a lot of ways to identify veterans, whether it's someone you meet on the street who has a hat on or a coat on, or maybe it's just a discussion at home with the family of, hey, did you know that your uncle served in Germany during World War II, or your family member is a veteran? So it's not always someone who's going to walk up on the street and say they're a veteran, but a veteran may be someone who is wearing a specific article of clothing that identifies them as a veteran. So those are the ones that we want to thank, and we'll get into that in just a minute here. You know what I like to encourage it as a veteran who wears a hat, I like to take the time if a young person or anyone walks up and says, thank you for your service. That's always the best way to start out. Say, thank you for the service. And my normal response is, I was honored to serve. And that's what I usually say. But once you break that ice, and breaking the ice means that you started a conversation with the person, that's when we can really get into some more discussion. So it's important, the first thing you do is you thank a veteran for their service. And you know, most veterans they welcome those discussions, especially from young people, because we know it's the young people who need to better understand what a veteran is or who a veteran is, so that they can share with their colleagues or share with their classmates, hey, I talked with a veteran this weekend, and this is what I learned. So it's a good opportunity to engage in that conversation, and you might actually learn something by doing that. You know, I'll tell you what I did in the military, but that's always a great question to ask that veteran once you identify him as a veteran. Because as I like to tell everyone, every veteran has a story. And that story is about what they did in the military. What I did in the military was I started out and I enlisted in the Army just a couple months out of high school. And I started my Army career then. And some of the things I did, I was a mechanic in the military. I also helped train soldiers, and because I was in the Army, you know, remember I talked about the branches, Army, Navy, Marine, Air Force, and Coast Guard. I was actually in the Army, and that's what my green flag represents here. I was in the Army. But so I was a mechanic, and then I went off to school, and I learned how to train people. So I helped train people, or train soldiers, I should say. And eventually I commanded a field artillery battalion. Now, field artillery, if you watch TV and you see the big guns shooting, the cannons and things, that's what I trained soldiers and led them how to do. I also went to Iraq, spent a year in Iraq, and when I was in Iraq, I helped train the Iraqi army so that American soldiers could come home. I helped recruit Iraqi soldiers. I helped find them housing, help them find a place to live when they came together as an Army unit. And then I also helped get their equipment to them, their trucks and their radios and equipment that they would need. And then, as I said, help them find a place to stay. But each unit we did that for, and each group of soldiers that we did that, then Americans could come home. After that, I worked at the Rock Island Arsenal, and you know where that is, down in Illinois. and I transferred a mission, a job that used to be done at the Pentagon is now being done at the Rock Island Arsenal. So my career was a lot different, but what you'll hear from several veterans is something similar to that, is that they maybe were a mechanic, or maybe they flew airplanes, or maybe they flew helicopters, or maybe they were on a ship, or maybe they were in a tank. But it's interesting because there's something to learn every time you talk to a veteran about what their sacrifices were in the military, and maybe even a little bit more about their families. I served I served 27 and a half years in the Army. And the Army sent me to Egypt. It sent me to Germany. It sent me to Japan. I've been to Korea, and I've been to Iraq. Most every state in the United States. I've been to Hawaii and New York and a lot of places throughout the United States. And the reason I think that's always a good question, where did you go? Because it may be something you're studying in school today. Maybe you're studying about Germany. And if you ask that veteran where they were at in Germany, and could you tell me a little bit about Germany? What did you learn there? And, so my response would be, when I was in Germany, I saw castles. When I was in Germany, I saw a lot of old houses and some small streets that a little bit different than what we have here in America. And of course, Iraq, when I was in Iraq, I saw a lot of sand, and made some great friends with some Iraqi people while I served there. But in Iraq, I also had a chance to serve with a lot of great people from a lot of different countries. I served with some soldiers from Australia. I served with military members from Germany, Poland, Great Britain, Japan, the Netherlands. I mean, it's just a great experience to meet people from so many different countries and experience of a lifetime that I'll never have a chance to do. I'm sure you've been studying about the pyramids in some of your classes, those things that were built long time ago that we don't understand how they built them because it was all manual labor. It was all done by hand. But I did get a chance to see pyramids, and I did get a chance to ride a camel. And if you've ever been to the zoo and seen a camel and look at a horse, it's a long ways up on a camel compared to getting on a horse. When I was at the Rock Island Arsenal, I talked about my time at Rock Island Arsenal. I had an opportunity, we have what we call bucket lists. And let me explain what a bucket list is. A bucket list is something you want to do someday. Maybe you can't do it today because you can't afford it, or maybe you can't do it today because you've got too many commitments. You have school. You can't do it because you have school. One of the items on my bucket list was to get to Korea. And when I served at the Rock Island Arsenal, I had a chance to go to Korea and experience Korea. It was only maybe a week long, but at least I got to see Korea. And it was when I came home from Korea, there was a war. We fought a war in Korea in the 1950s. And when I came home from Korea in 2012, anytime I'd see a Korean War veteran, I'd ask them what they remembered of Korea. And then I'd share with them how much Korea has grown and modernized from when they were there almost 50 years before I got there. So it's one thing about veterans where we recognize other veterans and we have nice conversations. We might have served in the same place. We might have experienced some of the same experiences. And it's a good brotherhood, sisterhood of men and women who had a lot of the same sacrifices and experienced a lot of the same things that most people don't understand, but we can talk about them and have a little chuckle. I talked about, how veterans know other veterans, and still, even yet today, I still talk to some of my veterans and my veterans friends, because some veterans experience some bad things, terrible things during their military service. And sometimes when you ask the questions, they may not always respond just because of some of their experiences. But for the most part, veterans will enjoy telling their story. Um, there's a lot of stories I could tell. When I came home from Iraq, I served with some great people, and I also an interesting story in Iraq. I had interpreters who would help talk to who could talk to the Iraqis who I dealt with on a day-to-day basis, and we relied on them to help us understand the Iraqi people the way they talk. Of course, they talk different than us. And I had one of the Iraqis was a young girl, young lady, who came in to ask me for some time off. She wanted to take time off, and I asked her why. And she was going to be one of the first stewardesses on the Iraqi airlines because the Iraqi airlines was starting up. Now, this is a country that hadn't had airplanes for many years because they were at war. But here was a young lady who was going to start a whole new career as a stewardess on an airline. And it was just something that it kind of reminds me of and refreshes my thoughts, the good times I had in Iraq of how this young lady was going to go forward and be one of the first at something she did in her very early career. But, I still, like I said, I still talk with many of the people I served with. I still have a lot of memories of a lot of different things. And there's sometimes that I'll just pause and think about, wow, that's pretty cool to have that thought once again of Korea, or that thought of the pyramids. And I couldn't go on the pyramids, and you could stand in line to go in the pyramids. I stood in line for a long time, but I'm what they call claustrophobic. I don't like tight places. And to go inside the pyramid, you had to go through a long tunnel. And as I was getting ready to go in that long tunnel, the man came out before me, had cracked his head open and had blood trickling down his nose. And I just could not go in that pyramid after seeing that. It scared me. So yeah, some of us big Army guys get scared, but it happens. It happens. So I couldn't go in the pyramids, and I guess it's always a regret, but I know what my limitations are. So, but when you get a chance, I want to wrap up here, is the best and most important thing you can do is, as you're doing now, is recognizing and honoring the veterans. This comes every year. We have Veterans Day on November 11th. But when you're out in the streets, I hope, or out in your neighborhoods or wherever you're at, I hope you take the time to pause and just ask the veteran their story. And each time you ask their story, at the end of your discussion with them, tell them once again, thank you for your service. So to Matherville Intermediate School, thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. I wish I could be there in person, but of course we know we can't be there. But I'm glad you're all participating in classes, and study hard and do the best you can and be all you can be. So thank you. Once again, State Representative Dan Swanson. I'm a Lieutenant Colonel retired from the United States Army. Thank you.